Welcome. I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher, from our BizVision studios in the UK. You're watching the BVTV network. Now, hands up if you hate to see the word meeting in your diary, either the old way, face-to-face in a room, or the new way, in a virtual room. I'm guessing there's a lot of hands raised today, as more than ever, we hate to waste precious time, which so many meetings do. My guest today has become a favorite of mine to interview because she tells it as it is. She's also just published, well, Penguin has, what is quickly becoming a bestseller book called Hold Successful Meetings. I told you she tells it as it is. So from the Leaderpath, let's say Calimera to Caterina Kostoula. Welcome, Caterina.
Thank you, Malcolm. I'm excited to be here.
Did I get the Calimera right? That's because it is morning, yeah?
Very good. Your Greek is excellent.
Oh, yeah. Half a pint of Demis Roussos, and that's it. I'm aware that's the maximum. It's lovely to be chatting together, but I'm so pleased we can be talking about the book and about successful meetings, because I just get, every time I get involved with academics or local authorities or something like that, it's meeting after meeting after meeting, and I try to keep myself awake, but never mind. Before I start my meeting with Caterina, I need to give viewers and listeners a warning. If you don't like the letter P, then you might be disliking this interview. The P is all around us as we discuss purpose, people, process, participation, penguin, and more. I'll be chatting to Caterina in three parts: preparation, participation, and productivity. First, I'll ask her how to successfully prepare for meetings. In part two, we'll talk about participation, getting people to be involved in a meeting, especially a virtual one. And in part three, we'll focus on how meetings can have a productive outcome. And along the way, we'll throw in a few more P's for you as well. But first, Caterina, can you briefly tell us how you arrived at wanting to write this book, your thoughts on meetings, and what you trust the reader will get from buying the book?
Sure. I have to say that if you had told me even 2 years ago that I would have written a book on meetings, I would have struggled to believe it. When I was in corporate life, before I launched my business, I struggle, especially the internal meetings, the typical status updates. And I thought it was just me. I thought I'm entrepreneurial and don't like meetings. But then I saw the data. 46% of employees would prefer to do anything else rather than attend a status meeting. 17% of them would prefer to watch paint dry. It is a real issue. And when I started coaching clients, I was seeing they were struggling with their meetings, whether they were ineffective, whether they were boring, struggling with their work-life balance because of meetings, or we would be working how they can show up in the meeting and influence in the meeting. And it was only when I was discussing with Penguin, they wanted me to contribute a leadership book for their Penguin Business Expert series. They were the ones that suggested the word meetings. And at the beginning, I was like, meetings? I hate meetings. That was my first reaction. But then I realized that all my career, first I was a salesperson and I will meet with clients. And then I was a coach, so I would have coaching sessions. All my career, my craft, what I really learned how to do well was also meetings. Like a coaching session was a meeting, and team coaching session was a meeting. A sales conversation was a meeting. So I said, actually, I have so many tools that I could take from team coaching and even sales. And I know you're an expert in this, and give them to the everyday managers and people who hold meetings to make them more interesting, purposeful, successful. That's how the book came about.
Excellent. Yeah. I just love that. I love that expression about, that you hated meetings too. And I'm thinking about doing a meeting, which is all about just watching paint dry. Do you think it'd go down? I think it might just go down quite well, that one. Caterina, let's get on with this virtual meeting. Part one. I hate going to meetings, as I've said, and I will continue to say, where it's obvious the chair or the leader has not done any preparation. I personally think that's rude as well as wasteful. I say in my sales coaching that preparation is 9/10 of the sale. Do you think that's true in meetings also? And if so, how should a leader prepare for a meeting, whichever style it is, in a room or virtual?
Sure. Preparation is hugely important. And there's research for that. Like the teams that prepare for the meetings, they have more successful meetings too. I would say the first thing is to decide what is the purpose of the meeting. And you may need to get some input from the participants. It depends on the meeting. I think that is the most important, because a lot of times we don't know what the purpose of the meeting is, or we have a purpose of the meeting that we are not achieving it in the best way. For example, I had teams that had boring meetings with status updates, and I said, why are you doing status updates? What's the purpose of this? And they said, we want to feel closer together. So having a status update is not the best way to achieve that. You could have some social time. So in my book, I introduce the 4D meeting framework, and it's around achieving purpose. So there are 4 stages to solve any problem. You need to define the problem or the goal, develop ideas, decide what to do, the way forward, and do what you decided. So the 4 Ds. So the idea is to ask yourself, which one of the 4 Ds, it could be one or more than one, are we going to work on in this meeting? I think with this simple framework, you will eliminate meetings that are not so much necessary, and also align the participants. You will say, we are in a meeting to define the goal, or we're in a meeting to develop ideas. Or if you have more than one Ds in one meeting, you do it in distinct stages. So in terms of preparation, I would say that's the most important. Then getting the right people in the room. We tend to get too many, especially with virtual meetings. We get too many people because it's easy. The cost of joining a virtual meeting are lower. Or we may not get the decision makers, for example, and then we're wasting all our time. So that's another part of preparation. Those are the 2 most important. Say, if you decide it's a do meeting and you need to influence, then there's a bigger part of preparation, right? Who's the audience? What do they want? What's their pain point? I would say then you need to prepare how to influence.
Can you just repeat the 4 Ds, please, so that my listeners, just do it slowly so my listeners can get that written down, because I think those 4 Ds are great. Go. Yes.
Define a problem or a goal. Develop ideas, decide, and do.
Brilliant. I like that. It's done simple, isn't it? So make sure you people who hold boring meetings are following that one. Caterina, before we move to part 2, I'd like to remind viewers and listeners of your URL, which is all the W's, of course, theleaderpath.com. I'll say that again for listeners. Viewers, you can see it on the screen behind me. theleaderpath.com. And Caterina's book is called Hold Successful Meetings, published by Penguin. There's the P again, Penguin Business Experts. I especially like the way that Caterina writes, making this both an easy and an informative read. I said to her beforehand that far too many books I review are vanity instead of having value. This is a book that really has value for you. Caterina, it's time for part 2. And participation. Now, I'm a great believer that meetings will only be successful if people are allowed to participate. And I emphasize the word allowed, as nobody wants to go to a meeting that's the equivalent of a sermon from the leader's pulpit. How can genuine participation be achieved, especially in a virtual meeting? What's in your book to help here?
There's plenty. I couldn't agree with you more. And there's, again, plenty of research that teams are more intelligent when there is more equal participation. And even when I spent 8 years as a business leader at Google did a lot of research to identify what separated successful teams with unsuccessful. And they couldn't figure it out, Malcolm. They were studying with all the Google's data crunching, and they were seeing individual performance didn't matter, how they were making decisions didn't matter, whether they were in the same office didn't matter. They just couldn't figure it out until they stumbled upon the research on psychological safety, which is exactly that. Psychological safety is that you are allowed to truthfully participate in meetings, that they realized that's what separated successful and unsuccessful. So I'll start with that, saying I couldn't agree more. So how do you do it? There are 2 steps on this. First is inclusion, which is everyone has an equal chance to participate. And that's something we need to be aware if we're the leader of the meeting, because we know that minorities, women are more interrupted. They're given less chances to participate. So how do you do that? You create a structure. For example, you won't have the sermon. You will maybe have a round robin, or you'll have breakout rooms, or you will say, let's all answer that question in the chat if it's a virtual meeting, or let's do a poll. Think about the structure of your meeting and how are you going to give the opportunity to people to participate. And for inclusion, be aware interruptions are not equally distributed. So you may want to avoid them. Like if you see people being interrupted a lot, you may want as a leader say, can we let Sarah finish her point? Or can we hear from other people if we see someone monopolizing the conversation? And then for psychological safety, which is not only they participate, but they say the difficult stuff, the mistakes, the crazy ideas, because that's what we want to have creative meetings, right? What you can do as the leader is admit your mistakes first, like model vulnerability, for example. When someone disagrees, as the leader, show the example of embracing the dissenting view. Say, oh, thank you for bringing this new perspective. How rarely we see that, right, Malcolm? Like we sometimes it has, I don't know if it has happened to you, but it has happened in my career that I would bring something that was a little bit controversial and I would be shut down in a meeting.
Yeah.
So these are some of the tips in the book of how to get people to participate more.
Yeah, I think that's so important what you've just been talking about there. I was recently, well, not recently because of COVID, but I had a coaching a team at a hotel, and they dreaded every Wednesday management meeting with the general manager, because it was just one whole 90 minutes of, and excuse the word, please, but I have to use it, bollocking by the general manager. And they said, we come out of there feeling yuck. And we've done hospitality is a hard business. You work hard in it, long hours and everything. We're trying our best there, and we never get any praise. It's always telling off every meeting. And guess what? Out of the 5 in the management team I was talking to, 4 were looking for other jobs at that particular time.
Exactly.
Quite frightening, isn't it? Now, Caterina, for part 3. The productive or the action part. How many meetings must be happening today that have no positive outcome? We'll have a meeting about the meeting before the meeting. What's your thoughts on ensuring that a meeting is, as you say, successful and has a productive or positive outcome?
Yes. First of all, I think we need to take care of the first 2 pieces, like the purpose, following the 4D framework, being clear what the outcome is, and having clear sections. Now we're developing ideas. Now we're deciding, not mix the 2 because it's counterproductive. But once you've taken care of purpose and people, process is the third P we need to look to make the meeting productive. And there's some counterintuitive truths here. For example, if you want to be super productive and jump right into the meeting, you're actually counterproductive. You need to, I spend 20 to 30% of the time of the meeting in the beginning and in the end. And that's something I wanted to share with our listeners today, because so many people skip this and it affects the success of the meeting.
Yeah.
So how do you start the meeting? There's plenty of research that if you spend time to connect, like you do so beautifully, Malcolm, for your podcast, like we always dial in earlier to connect as people before this is scientifically proven. It helps negotiations. It helps people be more themselves and share better ideas later. So many people skip the connection part in the beginning, clarifying the purpose, discussing how are we going to do this? Like I call it contracting in coaching. And another idea that Amazon and Twitter do is consume the information. So again, I like frameworks that start from the same letter. These are the C's: center around the purpose, connect, contract how you're going to do this, and consume any relevant content like Amazon does. They read 5 pages, a memo of 5 pages in the beginning of the strategic meetings. Instead of watching boring presentations, they just read the document and then they can discuss it. So this is the process. You don't have to follow all the steps always. But yes, starting well, it's important. And then it's finishing well. So many times, and this happened to me earlier as a coach, like we would have an interesting discussion or a team coaching session, and then the time would run out and the meeting runs over. Everybody hates that, right? Or you finish and you don't know what happened, right? And that's not a you meeting because you haven't achieved alignment. So how do you finish your meetings? You need 5, 10 minutes, whatever it is, depending on the duration of the meeting. Before it ends, you just stop and say, we reached what we reached today. We need to start wrapping up.
Yeah.
And what wrapping up means, alignment on what the decisions, what did we decide? Because sometimes people are not clear. They leave the meeting, they have no idea. Some people, you don't have their commitment, so they may even sabotage the decision. So alignment on what was decided, alignment on the next step. So you don't have meetings over meetings over meetings. Let's agree that. And recognition of the value that was created. So what was the key takeaway of our meeting today? So a simple 3 questions you can run in the end of the meetings and make sure this process will allow you to make the most value, to squeeze the most value out of this precious time together.
That's brilliant. Yes. I try to be as considerate as I can to people attending meetings. And I do ask them early on, if anybody has to leave early. Some people have to leave early because of childcare, for example, and I just think it's considerate to be thinking about that so that they don't feel that they've got to sneak out or anything like out of the meeting there. And I ask people also, has anybody got any car parking issues, that you need to know, that you need to go and feed the meter or whatever it may be. It's trying to be considerate, I suggest, is also important, is it not?
Absolutely. And that's beautiful to do in what I call the contracting stage, right? Because what's the rule of this meeting? Let's discuss. When someone needs to leave, do they write on the chat? Do they say hi? So these simple things. Is chat allowed? If it's an in-person meeting, is phones or screens allowed? Things that you can discuss of how we're going to do this in the beginning can make it so much easier and more comfortable for everyone to participate, because there's a lot of awkwardness. You're right. If someone needs to leave. I remember a member left from one of my group coaching sessions because she didn't want to bother the meeting, but I was so worried that she wasn't well. Yeah. So if I had spent time contracting even this small detail, how do people leave the meeting? It would have been easier. I would have avoided a lot of heartache thinking, oh my God, this is not doing well.
Yeah. I'm going to work on another thing whereby they can push a little button that said, "I'm bored, Malcolm," or something like that. So off they go. Listen, I want just squeeze a last little bit in there. I think far too many business or leaders are meeting focus on the word agenda instead of outcome. What do you suggest? Should we do the outcome first before the agenda, or the other way around?
Oh, definitely outcome first. Agenda, sometimes we're trapped by the agenda. There's so many mistakes we do with agendas. We squeeze too many things. So agenda can be useful for longer meetings or important. It aligns the participants, or it can allow you to jump, but outcome is 100 times more important. Focus on the outcome first. And then for agendas, I would say frame them as questions rather than imagine like a boring meeting, budget review. Imagine if it could be an outcome focused question. How can we improve our profitability by 10%? Which meeting do you want to attend? The budget review? Or how can we improve the profitability?
No, there's no argument there. You know which one it is for me. Some people, though, might just want to catch up on their sleep and go to the review meeting, might they? I started by asking you all to raise your hands if you dreaded seeing the word meeting in your diary. That doesn't have to be the case anymore if you not only get the book written by my guests, but also implement it. Oh, and remembering to keep the P's in mind. My thanks to the author of Hold Successful Meetings, Caterina Kostoula.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. This was a successful meeting, I think.
Without a doubt. Thank you.